What would you do if the people you trusted to protect your child decided her safety wasn't worth interrupting their lunch break? My name's Daniel Hale, and if you've ever wondered how far a father would go to save his daughter, this is my story. It all started about 6 months ago when my daughter Nora began her freshman year at Crestwood High. She's always been the quiet, artistic type, the kid who would rather sketch in her notebook than go to parties, but that seemed to make her a target. At first, I didn't think much of it when she mentioned a few boys teasing her on the walk home. She said they were juniors, bigger, louder, the kind of boys who travel in a pack. She brushed it off with a shrug, saying it was just dumb stuff. But over time, I noticed her walking faster to the car when I picked her up, glancing over her shoulder like she was expecting to be followed. Then came the first real sign that something was wrong. Nora stopped wanting to walk home at all. She begged me to pick her up after school even if I had to leave work early. When I asked her why, she said, "They're always there, Dad, waiting by the bike racks." I sent an email to the school counselor asking if she could talk to Nora and maybe keep an eye out. The counselor replied politely, promised to look into it, and then nothing happened. For months it was like that, Nora growing more withdrawn, me getting more worried, and the school doing absolutely nothing. Then came last Tuesday, the day that changed everything. It was just after noon and I was at my desk finishing a report when my phone buzzed. "Nora, Dad, please help." I froze. Before I could respond, another text came in. "Nora, they're in the bathroom. They're trying to get into my stall." My stomach dropped so fast it made me dizzy. I was already grabbing my keys and sprinting for the parking lot when I called the school office. The secretary answered in her usual monotone voice. "My daughter is in the third-floor girls' bathroom," I blurted out. "3 boys are trying to climb into her stall. You need to get someone there right now." There was a pause. I could hear the clacking of a keyboard. "Which bathroom, sir?" she asked flatly. "The one on the 3rd floor. I don't know which wing. Just get someone up there now." "Sir," she said slowly, "our protocol requires—" "I don't care about your protocol," I yelled, swerving out of the parking lot so hard my tires squealed. "My daughter is trapped in a bathroom with 3 boys trying to attack her." "Sir, please refrain from shouting," she said in that same calm, robotic tone. "I will make a note for the principal when she returns from lunch." I nearly threw my phone out the window. "Are you insane? She could be dead by then." I hung up and floored it. 8 minutes later, I screeched into the bus lane and left my truck sideways, hazard lights blinking. I didn't care about traffic. I didn't care about rules. When I ran through the front doors, the secretary looked up from her computer, already forming the words, "Sir, you need to sign in," but I was past her before she could finish. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering in my throat. The bathroom door was locked, and I could hear her crying inside. "Nora!" I shouted, pressing my ear to the cold metal door. There were other sounds too, scuffling, muffled laughter, and then a sudden sharp scream that made every hair on my body stand on end. I rammed my shoulder against the door, but these were reinforced doors, the kind they'd installed after the school shooting 5 years ago. They didn't budge. "Nora, I'm here." I grabbed a chair from the hallway and swung it as hard as I could. The chair exploded into splinters while the door stayed perfectly still. I grabbed the fire extinguisher next, hammering it against the lock until my arms ached. Metal clanged and echoed through the empty hallway, but nothing broke. By then, the secretary had finally appeared at the top of the stairs, huffing like she'd just run a marathon. "Sir, you're destroying school property," she panted. "I'm calling security." "Get me the key," I yelled. "I don't have keys to the bathrooms," she said, taking a step back like I was the threat here. "Only the principal does, and she's—" But I wasn't listening anymore. I was already sprinting toward the principal's office. Through the glass window, I saw her sitting at her desk, scrolling through her phone with a salad on the table in front of her. I pounded on the door. "My daughter is being attacked. Give me the keys." She looked up, held up 5 fingers, and mouthed the words, 5 minutes. Then she went back to her salad. Something in me snapped. I grabbed the nearest chair and smashed it through her office window. Glass exploded inward. The principal screamed, dropping her fork, but I didn't stop. I reached through this broken window, cutting my arm on the shards, and unlocked the door from the inside. The security guard appeared behind me, hand already on his radio. "Sir, you need to calm down." But I wasn't calming down, not when my daughter was screaming for help. I yanked open drawers until I found the key ring, my blood dripping on the principal's carpet. She was shouting something about calling the police, but I was already gone, sprinting back toward the bathroom. When I got there, the door was ajar. The boys were gone. Nora was curled on the floor, sobbing. Her shirt was torn, her hair matted with sweat and tears. I knelt beside her, my hands shaking. "It's okay, baby, I'm here." She flinched when I touched her shoulder. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, giving the dispatcher our location. As I was talking, the principal and the security guard rushed in. "You assaulted me!" the principal shouted, her voice high and panicked. "You broke school property!" I barely heard her. I was focused on Nora, wrapping my jacket around her and whispering that she was safe. When the paramedics arrived minutes later, they went straight to Nora. 2 officers stepped into the hallway and went straight to me. "That's him," the principal said, pointing at me. "He's the one who attacked me." One officer placed a hand on my shoulder and told me I needed to come with them. "You don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. 3 boys attacked my daughter. I had to get to her." "We'll discuss that at the station, sir," the officer said, guiding me away. As they led me down the hall, I looked back just in time to see the paramedics lift Nora onto a gurney. She kept her eyes shut, her small hands clenched tight. And I wasn't allowed to follow her. The officers guided me past a dozen classroom doors where curious faces were peeking out, cell phones raised to record the crazy man who broke a window. It felt like the entire school had already decided I was the villain. Outside, the sun was blinding. They put me in the back of the police car, hands cuffed, blood still dripping from my palm onto the vinyl seat, and drove me to the station. The booking process felt surreal. They took my fingerprints, mugshot, and made me sit in a small holding cell with peeling paint. My phone was taken, which meant I had no way of knowing where Nora was or whether she was okay. After what felt like hours, an officer came to the bars and told me I had a phone call. I didn't even think about calling a lawyer. I called the hospital. "I need to know if my daughter Nora Hale was just brought in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry, sir," the nurse said. "We can't give information over the phone. You'll have to come in person." "But I'm in police custody," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I just need to know she's alive." There was a pause, then a softer voice. "She's stable." That one word was enough to keep me from collapsing right there. They released me that evening with a citation for property damage and a court date. The sergeant who handed me my things said quietly, "You might want to get a lawyer, Mr. Hale." I practically ran to my truck and drove straight to the hospital. Nora was in a small room on the 3rd floor, sitting up in bed with a blanket around her shoulders. She looked so small. Her hair had been washed, but her eyes were hollow, like she'd aged years in just a few hours. She flinched when I entered the room, but when she saw it was me, she whispered, "Don't leave." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, pulling a chair close. We sat like that for a long time, me holding her hand gently, her staring at the wall, until a detective came in. "Mr. Hale, I'm Detective Megan Rios. I'm leading the investigation into the incident at Crestwood High." She was calm but firm, a notebook in her hand. "I'll need to interview both of you separately. Would that be okay?" I didn't want to let go of Nora's hand, but I nodded. In the hallway, I gave Detective Rios every detail, the texts from Nora, the call to the secretary, the principal holding up 5 fingers for her lunch break, my decision to smash the window. Detective Rios didn't react much, but I noticed her jaw tighten when I mentioned the 5 fingers. She scribbled notes quickly. When she went inside to talk to Nora, I paced the hall, listening to the faint sound of my daughter's voice. A nurse brought a stack of pamphlets, resources for trauma survivors, therapy options, legal advocates. I tried to listen, but it was like hearing someone talk underwater. My brain couldn't process anything except that Nora was breathing and safe for now. The hospital discharged her just after midnight. She wouldn't let me hug her, but she let me help her into the truck. "Can we not tell Grandma?" she asked softly as we drove home. I nodded. "Whatever you need, sweetheart." Back at the house, I went through every room, double-checking locks and closing curtains. I wedged a chair under the back door handle. My phone had 16 missed calls from the school, but I deleted the contact. They had failed my daughter. I was done with them. The next morning, the local news ran a story about a parent causing a disturbance at Crestwood High. They showed a blurry still frame from the security footage of me throwing the chair through the principal's window. Not one word about why. The comments online were brutal, calling me a psycho, saying parents like me were dangerous. I deleted my social media accounts rather than keep reading. That afternoon, Detective Rios called to schedule Nora's formal statement in 3 days. She explained that a victim advocate would sit with Nora through the entire interview and that it would be recorded for court. 3 days later, we drove to the police station. Nora clutched her blanket the whole ride. The advocate was a gentlewoman named Karina, who sat beside Nora, holding her hand as she spoke. I had to wait in the hallway. For 2 hours, I stared at the clock on the wall, my stomach in knots, until they finally came out. "She did really well," Karina said softly. Nora just nodded, looking exhausted. That night, there was a knock at the door. A process server handed me papers, a no trespass order banning me from school property indefinitely. The document claimed I had created a hostile environment for staff and students. I signed it with a shaking hand and added it to the growing pile of paperwork. 2 days later, my boss called me into HR. They'd seen the news clip. Words like conduct unbecoming and company reputation were thrown around. They put me on administrative leave pending review. It felt like everything was unraveling: my job, my reputation, my ability to protect Nora. I made an appointment with a lawyer named Adrian Mills, a sharp-looking man in a downtown office. I laid out the whole story. Adrian nodded, taking notes. "You have a strong case for why you did what you did," he said, "but you need to understand. The principal has political connections. This is going to get messy." He talked about plea deals, about how fighting the property damage charge might make me look unstable in court and hurt Nora's case. The thought of pleading guilty made my blood boil. But Adrian was right. This wasn't just about me. Meanwhile, Nora started seeing a therapist named Dr. Shirin Malik. The first few sessions were mostly intake questions and breathing exercises, but Nora came out of the third one looking slightly lighter, like someone had taken a brick off her chest. She showed me how to do a grounding exercise with her, naming 5 things we could see, 4 we could touch, 3 we could hear. For the first time since that awful day, I saw a flicker of the old Nora. Then, a week later, we got the first piece of good news. Detective Rios called to say the school's hallway cameras had caught all 3 boys entering the bathroom area minutes before Nora's texts. The timestamps proved the principal was lying about not knowing anything. She had been at her desk the whole time. Rios also obtained the school's phone records and confirmed my call at 12:47 p.m., as well as the secretary's call about property damage 8 minutes later, conveniently leaving out that a student was under attack. Piece by piece, the timeline was coming together. Then came the part that broke me. The results of Nora's medical exam arrived. The language was clinical and cold, but the meaning was clear. I had to run to the bathroom and throw up. Rios told me this evidence strengthened the case significantly, but all I could think about was what my daughter had endured. I tried to sign up to speak at the school board meeting. The clerk told me I couldn't discuss specific student matters in public comment. So I started writing remarks about general student safety instead. A reporter emailed me, asking for our side of the story. I gave her Detective Rios's contact info. 2 days later, we got more good news. A custodian came forward with a sworn statement saying he'd seen the boys that morning with keys they shouldn't have had. Meanwhile, Adrian called to warn me that the principal had filed for a restraining order against me. We'd have to fight it in court next week. By this point, Nora had been out of school for nearly a month. She wanted to try going back for just 1 class. I walked her to the building, staying just outside per the no trespass order. She made it halfway down the hall before freezing. She'd caught the faint smell of cologne, the same one of the boys always wore, and her whole body went rigid. We left immediately. She cried the entire drive home, apologizing for being weak. That night, I sat at the kitchen table going over every piece of evidence we had: texts, phone logs, camera footage, medical reports. Each one told the same story. The school had ignored Nora until it was too late. I wasn't going to let them bury this. The following week, we faced the restraining order hearing. The courthouse was cold and echoey, its marble floors amplifying every step like a warning. Adrian sat beside me at the table, flipping through his notes, whispering last-minute strategy. The principal was across the aisle, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. She wouldn't look at me, just kept whispering into her attorney's ear. When it was our turn, Adrian argued that my actions were not malicious but an emergency response to save my daughter's life. He showed the judge Nora's frantic texts, the time-stamped call records, and even security footage proving my timeline. The principal's attorney argued that I was a threat to staff safety and that I had displayed violent tendencies that traumatized students. The judge listened patiently, then leaned forward. "It's clear that the school's response time was inadequate," she said, "and while Mr. Hale's actions were extreme, they were provoked by an urgent situation. I'm issuing mutual stay-away orders. Neither party may contact or approach the other outside of legal proceedings." It wasn't the vindication I wanted, but it was better than being branded a dangerous maniac. Adrian whispered, "This is good. Now she can't testify freely about you without violating the order. It levels the field." A few days later, we received certified letters from the district. The 3 boys were barred from contacting Nora while the investigation continued. But that same afternoon, Nora got an Instagram message from a fake account. "You ruined everything." We both knew exactly who had sent it. Her hands shook as I took screenshots, including the account details and timestamps, and sent them to Detective Rios. 2 hours later, Rios called with the first truly hopeful tone I'd heard from her. She had obtained hallway footage showing all 3 boys walking into the bathroom corridor at the exact time Nora texted me. "They can't deny they were there now," she said. Hearing that made Nora cry, not out of fear this time, but relief. Still, the road ahead was long. The district sent more letters promising policy reviews and future safety improvements, but they were just words. Those boys were still walking around free while my daughter couldn't set foot in a hallway without panic. The local reporter emailed again, saying she was working on a feature about school safety failures. She wanted to quote me anonymously. I agreed. If the school wouldn't protect kids, maybe public pressure would. A week later, her article ran online. It didn't name Nora, but it laid out the timeline in brutal detail: the ignored complaints, the delayed response, the locked bathroom door. The comments section exploded. Parents demanded answers. By the end of the day, the district announced an emergency board meeting to review safety protocols. For the first time, I felt like we were forcing them to do something. Meanwhile, Nora's therapy was starting to make a difference. Dr. Malik taught her breathing exercises, grounding techniques, and even some gentle exposure work like walking past the school after hours when it was empty. One morning, Nora came downstairs and said, "I slept through the night." I didn't say anything at first, just made her favorite pancakes and acted like it was a normal Saturday morning, but inside, I felt like we'd just climbed a mountain. A few days later, Detective Rios called with another bombshell. She had obtained the principal's personal phone records. "She had multiple calls come in while you were pounding on her door," Rios said. "She didn't answer any of them." That was proof she had knowingly ignored an emergency. When the district heard about the phone records, they quietly put the principal on administrative leave, pending review. Nora smiled for the first time in weeks when she heard that news. "She can't hurt us anymore?" she asked. "Not for now," I said. But our battle wasn't over. A process server showed up with more papers, this time for the criminal case against the boys. They would be charged with assault and unlawful restraint. Hearing those words out loud made me dizzy. Adrian warned me the defense lawyers would fight hard to paint it as kids being kids. But we had the evidence, and now we had a DA willing to prosecute. That weekend, I sat at the kitchen table organizing everything: phone logs, security footage stills, the custodian's sworn statement, Nora's medical report. Each piece was a brick in the wall we were building around her, a wall to protect her from being ignored again. Then, something unexpected happened. Another girl came forward. Her lawyer contacted Detective Rios, saying she had been cornered by the same 3 boys in an empty classroom last year, but had been too scared to tell anyone until she heard about Nora. Her statement described the exact same pattern: following her after school, making comments about her body, trapping her where no one could help. Rios said this changed everything. Now it wasn't just Nora's word, it was a pattern of behavior. She spent the next 2 weeks building a case file so thick it could have been a textbook, complete with timeline charts, witness lists, and every scrap of digital evidence. When she handed it over to the DA's office, she warned us not every recommended charge would stick, but she'd pushed for as much as possible. While we waited, I had to deal with my own legal trouble. Adrian said the DA was offering a plea deal, misdemeanor property damage, probation, and paying for the principal's broken window. I wanted to fight. I wanted to stand in court and scream that I had a right to save my daughter. But Adrian said, "This isn't about winning pride points, Daniel. This is about keeping you free and focused on Nora." I swallowed my anger and signed the plea deal, even though it felt like admitting I was wrong. The judge sentenced me to 6 months of probation and 200 hours of community service picking up trash along the highway. It was humiliating, but it kept me out of jail, which meant I could keep showing up for Nora. The next week, we finally got the call from the DA's office. They were filing charges against 2 of the boys and sending the youngest to juvenile court. Some charges got dropped due to lack of physical evidence, but the main assault charges stuck. Nora was terrified when she learned she would have to testify at a preliminary hearing. "I can't look at them," she whispered. "You won't be alone," I promised. "Karina will be there, Detective Rios will be there, and I'll be right outside that door." The day of the hearing, Nora wore the soft blue sweater Dr. Malik had given her for courage. She walked into the courtroom with Karina holding her hand, shoulders shaking but head held high. I couldn't hear what she said, but I could see her from the hallway window, see the way her fists clenched, see the tears running down her cheeks as she answered questions. The defense lawyers tried to trip her up, asking why she hadn't screamed louder, why she hadn't fought harder. But she didn't break. When she walked out of that courtroom, she looked exhausted, but somehow stronger. "I did it," she whispered. "Yes," I said, hugging her carefully. "You did." The next day, the local paper ran a front-page story about the hearing, using our case as an example of systemic failure. Parents flooded the next school board meeting demanding change. By the end of that week, the district announced mandatory safety training for all staff and promised to install additional cameras in blind spots. It wasn't enough, but it was something. At work, HR finally called me back. They decided to give me a 2-week unpaid suspension for negative publicity, but allowed me to keep my job and health insurance. It stung, but I needed that insurance for Nora's therapy bills. When I told Nora, she said quietly, "I'm sorry you're in trouble because of me." I knelt beside her and said, "Never say that again. You are not the problem, they are." 3 days later, Dr. Malik suggested a support group for survivors. Nora agreed reluctantly. I waited in the parking lot for an hour while she sat in a room with 5 other girls who had lived through similar nightmares. When she came out, her eyes were red, but her shoulders looked lighter. She didn't say much, but on the drive home, she whispered one sentence that made my throat tighten. "I survived." It wasn't over, but it was a start. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet, like we were in the eye of a storm. Nora started going to therapy twice a week. She didn't say much about what happened in those sessions, but I noticed small changes. She would eat a little more at dinner. She would open her bedroom curtains in the morning, and she even started sketching again. One evening, she brought her sketchbook to the kitchen table while I was sorting through court documents. She didn't say anything, just sat across from me, drawing. I didn't realize how much I'd missed that sound, the soft scratch of her pencil against paper, until that moment. 3 weeks later, the district called with an offer for interim safety measures for when Nora returned to school. They proposed giving her a modified schedule, an escort between classes, and access to a private bathroom. I wrote down every question I could think of. What happens if the escort calls in sick? What about fire drills, assemblies, lunch? The district representative said, "We'll handle those situations as they come up." That answer didn't sit well with me. Their best hadn't been enough the first time. But Nora surprised me by saying, "I want to try." We spent the weekend walking through the empty school hallways with a counselor, mapping out safe spots, the nurse's office, the library exit, the counselor's room. Monday morning came too soon. Nora put on a new backpack with trembling hands and got in the truck. The escort, a kind older woman named Mrs. Jensen, met us at the side entrance and walked Nora to her first class. I waited in the parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached. 2 hours later, Nora came out looking pale and drained, but not broken. "I did it," she whispered. I drove us straight to the ice cream shop, even though it was barely lunchtime. She ordered 3 scoops. That was the first time I'd seen her smile in months. 3 weeks into the new routine, I got an email from the district with a line buried near the bottom. "Principal, Dana Price has been reassigned to a curriculum development position effective immediately."
Wow.
I read it 3 times. She hadn't been fired, the teachers' union wouldn't allow that, but at least she wouldn't be around kids anymore. When I told Nora, she let out a long, shaky breath. "Good," was all she said. That same week, Adrian called with news. The youngest boy's lawyer wanted to negotiate a plea deal that would include mandatory treatment, probation until adulthood, and a permanent restraining order. "The other 2 are still fighting the charges," Adrian said, "but this plea could strengthen the case against them." When I told Nora, she nodded slowly. "I feel a little safer," she admitted. Saturday morning, we went to the garden center and bought a small oak tree. We dug the hole together in the far corner of the yard, neither of us talking about why we were doing it, just focusing on the dirt under our nails, the weight of the soil, the sound of the shovel hitting rocks. Every morning after that, Nora went outside to water it before school. She stood there for exactly 5 minutes, watching the water soak into the ground like it was the most important job in the world. 3 months crawled by. Court dates got pushed back. The district sent more letters about policy improvements. Nora kept going to therapy, slowly adding 1 more class to her schedule each month. Then, one Tuesday night while we were making spaghetti, I made a dumb joke about the noodles looking like worms, and Nora laughed. A real laugh, not just a polite smile. I stood there stunned, holding a wooden spoon like it was a holy relic. For one moment, she sounded like the girl she used to be, the one who sang off-key in the shower and begged me to stay up late watching movies. The day of the trial finally arrived months later. Nora had to testify again, this time in open court. She wore the same soft blue sweater and clutched a stress ball Dr. Malik had given her. When she took the stand, I could see her knees shaking. The prosecutor guided her gently through the questions. Then the defense lawyer stood up. His tone was cold, sharp. He asked why she hadn't screamed louder, why she hadn't run, whether she was sure she didn't misinterpret playful behavior. Nora's chin wobbled, but she didn't look away. "I know what happened to me," she said firmly. I felt tears sting my eyes. When she stepped down from the stand, the prosecutor whispered, "You were brave," and Nora gave the smallest nod. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they came back with guilty verdicts on the main assault charges, I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time since that awful day. Nora didn't cry. She just squeezed my hand and whispered, "Can we go home now?" On the drive back, we didn't talk about sentencing or probation or what the boys' futures might look like. We just talked about what movie we'd watch that night. A week later, the district sent an official letter confirming that the boys were permanently expelled and that all staff would be required to complete 40 hours of emergency response and Title IX training. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was more than I'd thought we'd get. Nora continued therapy, started going to her support group twice a month, and even agreed to join an art class again. The first time she came home smelling like turpentine, I nearly cried. One crisp Saturday morning as the sun rose, Nora stood next to the oak tree we had planted and said, "It's getting taller." I nodded, looking at her. "So are you." She smiled, small but real. "We're not over what happened. You don't get over something like that. But we're living with it, one day at a time." I'm writing this now at our kitchen table while Nora sits across from me doing geometry homework. She occasionally asks for help even though she knows the answers. I think she just wants me there. And that's enough. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means more than you know. I want to leave you with this. Never let anyone convince you that fighting for your child is wrong. Not a school, not a principal, not even the entire system. Because sometimes you have to break a window to save a life. This has been Stories Untold. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they're not alone. And if you've ever had to fight for your child, leave a comment. I read every single one. Until next time, my friend, stay safe.